Welcome back to another episode and welcome back into my kitchen. The next couple episodes we're going to be going through how to cook pasta, different types of pastas, different types of recipes. We love pasta around here because teenage boys, filling, inexpensive, affordable. We can do all kinds of different fun things with it, and we're going to unpack all of that for you in the next couple of episodes. I want to teach you the mechanics of cooking the perfect pasta noodle. There's some nuances I want you to know and understand so that you can make the best pasta in your kitchen. Of course, you can check the cooking time recommendations for the different pasta on your packaging, but I just kind of forget to do that, and it essentially just have learned how to sort of eyeball cooking times based on the size and sometimes the shape of the pasta shell. So I want to show you this example here. These are mini penne and regular penne rigate pasta shells. You can see the difference in size. These are the tiny guys. Aren't they cute? They're like babies. And then we have the larger ones. This one is actually like a thinner piece of pasta, and this one is thicker. This one's gonna take less time to absorb the water because it's just thinner. That's like a millimeter, and this is possibly 1.5 millimeters, and especially here in the middle part, a little bit gonna take longer to cook. So just know and just kind of eyeball the pasta size in order to determine, is this gonna take 7 minutes, 9 minutes, 11 minutes? It's probably gonna be somewhere in that range. I'm gonna predict that this mini penne will take probably 7 to 8 minutes, and this larger penne is gonna take closer to 10 or 11 minutes to cook to al dente. Contrary to what I think is the most efficient thing in the kitchen, in starting with hot water and then boiling, you're actually supposed to start with cold water, bring it to a rolling boil, and then add the pasta at the rolling boil stage. So we're gonna start with cold water and fill up our pot. I recommend using at least 4 quarts of water for every 1 pound of pasta. So I'm using my larger stock pot for this. I usually use this when I'm cooking the longer noodles like spaghetti or fettuccine or linguine, but I also use it for just cooking a pound of pasta for macaroni or marinara sauce or whatever other pasta meal we might be having. So I got my cold water over here now, and I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon of salt, just table salt, and I am going to put the lid on, and I am going to put this on high heat. It'll be just a couple of minutes till we get that rolling boil stage. If you have power boil on your stovetop, yay for you. When we were in our rental house a couple years ago, the stove had a power boil feature, and it was quick. It warmed up water quickly. So just be mindful, if you do have that and you use it on the regular, your water will boil very, very quickly. If you don't have that, that's okay. It'll just take a couple extra minutes. If you're in the market for a stove, new one, be on the lookout for one with the power boil. I think most of the newer ones come with that power boil feature, so it'll just make this type of meal even faster. The bubbles are starting to form around the edge of the pot and up the middle. A little steamy here, but we are just about at rolling boil, and we're ready to add the pasta in. We're going to pour in that pound of pasta, and then I'm gonna stir it for about 10 to 15 seconds. This will help keep any pasta noodles from sticking to the bottom. And then I'm gonna put the lid on for maybe a minute, 30 seconds to a minute, and that will help bring the boil up faster. And then I'll take the lid off to finish cooking the pasta in the pot. When the steam starts to come out, it's time to take the lid off so that does not happen. I actually let it happen on purpose, but we don't want that to happen. So that's why I say leave it on for about a minute. Of course, use a pot holder if it's hot, because it will bubble up like that. When your pasta bubbles over like that, this pot is larger so it doesn't happen, but if I'm using a smaller pot, those bubbles will get so high and they won't go down. So you can just blow on it and the bubbles will disappear. If you want to hurry things up a little bit and you don't have the power boil, you can put the lid on and just leave it cracked so that it won't bubble up and boil over like we saw a minute ago. This will help keep more heat in the pot and help keep that water nice and boiling and cooking your pasta to perfection. The penne has been cooking for a couple of minutes and it's time to check to see if it's ready. You can cook pasta that you are going to enjoy with the sauce, like when you're cooking the pasta and the sauce, kind of combining it separately. You can cook that until you like the consistency of it. There are other occasions where you're going to want to cook the pasta to what's called al dente, which in Italian I think means to like bite, and or to tooth, I think in Spanish. Like, I don't know, Italian, Spanish, they're kind of similar. But basically to not crunchy, not chewy, but just perfectly done. And oftentimes recipes call for al dente when you're going to continue to cook it in either some other type of sauce, or if I'm adding it in with Alfredo, it'll still cook another minute before as you're combining it and pull it off the stove. But al dente, watch the recipe. Cooking to al dente is usually a minute, maybe 2 minutes less than cooking to complete, done, depending on what you're, cooking it with and mixing it with later. I'm going to be mixing this with just a homemade marinara sauce, so I'm going to go ahead and cook it all the way through, maybe 1 more minute than I would if I was cooking al dente. So with like spaghetti, you've heard to like throw it against the wall and see if that sticks. Well, that's gonna leave a nasty mess behind on your wall. Do not recommend. I usually just take one, in this case noodle, set it down for a minute. I do not want to put that in my mouth right now because it will literally burn my tongue, and no thank you. So I'm just gonna let that sit for a second while this is still in here. Give it one nice stir, nothing sticking. I love that. This is why we cook it in advance. I will just grab a fork just to make sure. Oftentimes too, you can see if the pasta is cooked all the way through, so there might be a little different color, especially in these longer penne shapes, or even the shells that have the thicker middle part of the shell. If it still looks not quite, in this case, yellow, and it looks more like clear uncooked, then leave it in for another minute or two until it is cooked through. Not quite ready, not even al dente, so I'm gonna give it another minute or two. This is the glass measuring cup that I like to use to reserve cooking liquid from my pasta. Not every recipe needs to have the cooking liquid reserved, but the starchiness that the pasta releases into the cooking water, you can use that in your sauce later. It helps the sauce stick a little bit better to your pasta. It really depends on what you're making later. You don't have to reserve it every single time, but you might definitely reserve it if the recipe calls for it. You might also reserve it in case you need it. Of course, if you don't, you can just dump it out and carry on with your meal. So I'm just going to take about a half a cup, and I'm going to press it against the edge of the pot to avoid any pastas from trying to escape in there. You can see how nice and starchy that is. And then I'm going to turn off the heat and we can take this over to drain. All right, my strainer was already in the sink, and I'm going to fish out the last character here. Now, depending on a couple thoughts here after I finish my steam bath. A moment at the spa here. I don't usually rinse the pasta unless I'm going to be doing a cooler, chilled, cold style pasta. In that case, I will rinse it with cold water. In this case, I'm not going to rinse at all. If for some reason I'm not going to use this pasta within the next, say, 10 to 15 minutes while it's still fairly warm, I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil to the bottom of the pot that I cooked it in, and I'm going to add it back in to the pot, and that olive oil will just help keep that from sticking back together. Just give that a quick little toss, have myself another little steam bath here, and we'll let that sit until we're ready to toss it with whatever sauce that we're going to be cooking with. If you aren't going to let it sit at all and it's ready to go into its sauce, or the sauce is ready to go in with the pasta, you can just go ahead and do that right away. But if it's going to sit at all, just use olive oil to help keep that from getting sticky. So we've gone over cooking pasta kind of by itself in different pots, different shapes, different sizes, all that. But what about cooking pasta in a pasta skillet where there's already a base there? In this case, we're going to be using a ground beef and tomato sauce base. We're going to add some broken lasagna noodles to it, and we're going to end up with the perfect weeknight spinach lasagna skillet. Making lasagna is very time intensive. It can be laborious depending on how you do your lasagna noodles, but this is much faster, all the same amazing flavors, all the same beautiful richness in your bowl. But in this case, it's just gonna take a couple of minutes to cook on the stovetop. The first thing we're gonna do is brown a pound of ground beef. This is gonna make a good hearty 4 servings, 6 servings if you've got a family with different serving sizes or whatnot. I can usually get away with this for my family of 6. So we're gonna start by browning a pound of ground beef, and I'm gonna add in 1 tablespoon of minced dried onions and 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. That's pretty much the garlic and onion ratio that I use with browning pretty much most ground beefs, not every single time, but mostly. So I'm just going to sprinkle that right in with the ground beef, and we're going to mix that in. And then we will let this brown and let the onion and garlic flavors combine with the ground beef. So I'm gonna let this sit for a minute to brown. When I'm doing a ground beef skillet like this, I generally go for a leaner ground beef. 85 would be the lowest, maybe 90, 93, even 96, because then you don't have to drain it. The fat is totally great. It'll incorporate into all of the sauce here, but if you're using a 73, you're gonna wanna drain that and then add the meat back into the skillet and mix in all the other goodies, but it's just one more step, so go with the slightly leaner option so you don't have to drain. There's 2 cooking gadgets pretty much obsessed with, and this is going to be one of them. I'm obsessed with a lot of cooking gadgets, but ultimately my 2 favorites are my bag holders for holding up bags for freezer meals, and also this meat chopper and server. It's got edging to break up the meat, also works really well with a pork sausage because that tends to be a little fattier and stickier, breaking that up. And also it has this longer edge here that you can use for scooping, you know, after you add your sauce, like sloppy joes, let's say, you can then scoop out the sauce right onto your buns. Really fantastic and easy, both for getting the ground beef browned and also for serving it. The ground beef is browned, and now I'm gonna add the mountain of spinach, and we're gonna let it shrink. This is a 6-ounce bag's worth of fresh spinach. You could use a 10-ounce bag of like frozen chopped spinach, but I think this is kind of magical. It's a good little science experiment for the kids too. Uh-oh, man down. I'm gonna let this wilt, and you're gonna watch it. It's kind of wild how this giant mountain will get to be so small. Wild, right? My kids always get a giggle out of that because it's like literally a mountain, and now it's just going to be mixed right in. All right, with this we're going to add in a can of diced tomatoes. I'm doing petite diced. You can do regular diced. They're just smaller and easier to eat, especially if you have little mouths. And I'm doing 2 8-ounce cans. I thought I had a 15-ounce can, but this will work. It's more or less the same amount. So you might be like, oh my gosh, that skillet's so full. How are we adding more things to it? We are. This is my 12-ounce skillet. It has a lid, and that it's going to be large enough for this. It's going to be very full, but it is going to be large enough for what we're going to add to it. Before we get to the pasta and the stock, I'm going to just give this a good stir through, and I'm going to add a little bit of seasoning, about a tablespoon of Italian seasoning blend. I'm just going to incorporate that. Those flavors will hang out while this is simmering and cooking the lasagna noodles. Next is going to be 2 cups of beef stock. You could do chicken or vegetable or water. I like the beef stock because of the flavor. And we're going to pour that in there. Now we're getting to the full status point here. The next part of this is the most important part of any skillet, pasta meal. And what we need to do is we need to do 2 cups of pasta for every 8, maybe 10 ounces of pasta noodles. And that kind of depends on the type of pasta noodle. I'm going to do 6 lasagna noodles, and I'm going to break them into smaller pieces. And then we're going to nestle. Can nestle be the word of the day? We're going to nestle them into the liquid. The one rule with cooking a pasta skillet, besides making sure that you have the right amount of liquid, which I just gave you those numbers, is we've got to get the pasta underwater. It's got to be completely swimming because you can see it's still above water here. That's okay. I'm gonna move it. You don't want any chewy pasta. I don't want chewy pasta. I know you don't want chewy pasta. And so we are going to nestle this down in with these lasagna skillets. Because these pieces are a little wider, I can sometimes like slide them underneath to the bottom. But ultimately we're gonna end up with all these same flavors. That's really loud. I'm gonna just do this real fast. I'm gonna just use my server to get these all underwater, to kind of nestle some down towards the bottom. They just need to be all underwater. This is starting to, we're kind of at a rolling boil point with that sauce. This is really good timing. We're probably gonna need to cook this 8 to 10 minutes with the lid on. I don't want you to remove the lid. You know, the sauce is on the bottom, so the pasta is not gonna get stuck to the bottom of the pan. So the pasta is all now swimming underwater, and I'm gonna put the lid on and cook for 8, 9, 10 minutes. And some of the pastas at the top layer here will start to emerge, but that's okay. That's because they're soaking up some of the liquid as the pasta absorbs the broth in this skillet. Okay, now we wait. I just took the lid off, and I'm gonna bring it over here so I can show you how to sort of finish this off and bring in all of the other lasagna flavors. I'm gonna give this a once over stir. So this is perfectly cooked. The lasagna is ready to go. I usually pull this off when the lasagna is al dente because it is going to continue to cook for another minute or two in the sauce. It's so warm. As it cools down, the sauce will start to thicken up. So you might be looking at this going like, how in the world? It's not soupy, but it will thicken. And again, you can always let the extra liquid boil off for another minute or two without the lid on. If it looks really too saucy to you, this is actually perfect right here. This isn't too saucy, even though it looks a little bit on the runnier side right now. It will absolutely thicken up as it cools. I usually will be warming up some bread or making toast or veggies, side dish, salad, whatever it may be, while this is cooking and then while it is cooling down. To finish this off, there are two things that I add to the top of this. I will dollop either cottage cheese, and I say cottage cheese because it's a little bit cheaper and we're all pinching our pennies right now. The other option is going to be ricotta. If you want that more traditional flavor, you're just going to dollop ricotta. So I'm going to use ricotta now, and I'm just going to give it a little stir, and I'm just going to get little ice cream scoop ball size and just let it there. The sauce will warm it up. It might even run a little bit. We're just going to do little dollops, and then we are going to sprinkle with grated, you can do shredded, but I think grated works best, Parmesan cheese. And then we have ourselves the perfect spinach lasagna skillet. Yum. Finally, grated parm right on top. And there we have our spinach lasagna skillet. We're gonna get this into some serving bowls, and I'm gonna show you my favorite hack for keeping this in the fridge for leftovers the next day. Time to serve our lasagna skillet. I usually try and grab a bit of that ricotta. I like the ladle. This, again, it's not really soupy. It will thicken as it cools, I promise. But this way, we're getting all the right noodles from the bottom, the sauce as well. I'll take this last guy. This is the silicone ladle that we have in our store. And I love it because the edge has a bend to it, which means I can like scoop and scrape, which around here when we're eating the entire meal that I make and we're scraping for the second or third bowl of whatever it is my boys like to do, then we've got this handy dandy ladle to do that. Now, finally, if you're not going to eat all of this, we often end up with leftovers, sometimes with this one, sometimes not. It depends on what we have with it, side dish wise. But we can use this, keep this in the fridge. I like to do portion into bowls. I know I'm going to eat this for lunch tomorrow. If there's one portion left especially, this poppy lid is magical. I'm going to show you something and you're going to be like, oh, but I promise it's going to be okay. I'm going to go right on the top of the bowl. Handy dandy. You could like take the bowl and put it in your fridge. You can also lift it all. Is this making you nervous? It's making Lauren nervous. It's not making me nervous. I've lifted heavier things with this particular lid. It just does a magical job, obviously, of sealing because it can hold that much weight with the food and the glass bowl that this is in, but it's also going to help keep that freshness inside when you are storing it in the fridge, and then it's going to be perfect for the next day. You can even leave the lid on and reheat in the microwave if you're going to do that. I think it also does a really good job when you have this lid on and you're reheating things in the microwave. It does a good job of dispersing the heat nicely of the food that's inside of the bowl. So check this out, as well as the ladle and the meat server in the Erin Chase store. We learned a lot in this video. We learned all the possibilities. I know, I'm sorry, I can't help myself. And we learned how to do pasta in a skillet meal with this amazing spinach lasagna pasta. We have more great pasta videos to come. We also have some egg videos from last month. You're gonna wanna be sure to check those out. And please like and subscribe to the Erin Chase YouTube channel. We're gonna be sharing new episodes and cooking videos at noon Central Time on Wednesdays.